So I was like, well, I could actually get a lot of people from that community to come to my event if I host it the same week, because then I get the free awareness of it's also listed on the Utah Tech Week schedule and it's on my own Luma page. So maybe that's what we talk about. How do you do it? We use different platforms. This is Truly Independent, a show that demystifies the indie film journey by documenting the process of releasing independent films in theaters. Each week, Garrett Batty and I, Darren Smith, will update you on our journey, bringing guests to share their insights into the process and answer your questions. Garrett, hey man, how's it going?
Welcome, Darren. Good. How are you doing?
Oh man, I'm so stoked. We'll talk about why, but it's just like the best time of year, right? We're in the middle of Sundance right now. Last weekend was opening weekend. And there's events all this week that you and I are a part of. And so we're going to talk about a lot of cool stuff today. And I'm just jazzed.
Good. I'm glad. I always love it when I log on and there you are in one of your good moods and have a lot to talk about. So it's contagious. So thank you for bringing that energy.
That's
And
good.
yeah, it is. We're in the middle of Sundance right now. We're recording this on the 28th. So middle of Sundance. And so far it's been an amazing festival. I've had the chance to go up a couple of times to different events. And so I'm excited to talk about those.
Yeah, I was a little bummed because I had a bunch of church events on Sunday. And so I was planning on going back up Sunday, but didn't make it back up there. Didn't make it up there yesterday. So I was only up there Friday night. And man, it's just a vibe, as the kids say these days. Like it was just palpable that like film is happening. This is what I want to be doing. This is the kind of people I want to be spending my time with.
Yeah, I went up Saturday night and it was snowing. Just like terrible drive up and an amazing, a beautiful drive up, but it was snowing. So if you like that, which I do, and it was
Mm-hmm.
beautiful. Got got to one event, kind of so the Impact Lounge there in Prospector. Spent some time there, met or worked, saw some people I know, visited with some critics, and they were talking about some great films that they had seen. And then I worked my way up to Main Street for an Angel Studios event, which, big announcement, they are releasing Faith of Angels on February 11th on their streaming
Hey,
site.
we
Uh,
have a date, folks. We have a date.
we have a date. It was great to be at the event. They talked about Brave the Dark, which they had just released in theaters that weekend. So we'll be able to talk about that. But yeah, I just came away totally recharged. There's just a great vibe, and it is independent film is happening and moving the needle and very much alive and thriving. And it's so fun to be a part of it.
Yeah, I love it. So, kind of related to a festival, there's an opportunity there. A lot of people go to festivals to try to move their projects along, right? They're
Sure.
thinking, oh, there's 10, 20, 50,000 people descending on Park City. There's probably got to be one or two that I could talk to and, connect with, whether it be financiers, investors, executive producers, or whether it be producers, directors, writers, actors. They're all there, right? So, how do you do it? Is kind of what we were thinking about talking about today. And then I was also thinking about the question that keeps popping up over and over and over wherever I'm at, whether it's online or offline, is how do you raise money? Like that's the thing that every filmmaker needs to crack because they're good at the creative stuff. They can come up with stories and scripts and projects all day long, but it's bridging that gap between, well, I have a good project or what I think is a good project. How do I get it financed? So we're going to talk about that today. Does that sound good to you?
I think it's great. Yeah, good topics, and it is a question that I think stops a lot of people from making the movie. Like that is an obstacle
Yeah.
on how to raise money, how to find those people. We've touched on it already. I mean, we've been in this development season of our podcast for several episodes. We've talked about pitching and coming up with ideas. But yeah, let's talk about especially. I mean, you're doing an event tonight with a group of investors, so I can't wait to. Yeah, I'm gonna just let you unload. Like, tell us your secret. How'd you line that up? So,
Yeah,
where do you want to start?
we're taking turns because last week you had a list of 10 and this week I've got the five W's. So we're going
Oh,
to talk about a fundraising event. Why do you do it? How do you do it? Where do you do it? All those kind of things. I guess the 5 W's and an H or whatever it is. I don't remember high school
What,
grammar or
when,
whatever.
where, why, and
What, where, when, why, and how.
wow.
Yes. So I think, though, there's a little bit of context that's important here, because I don't want people to take away from this conversation that, like, oh, I have a project. I could just spin up an event next week and get 100 people there that are all investors and raise the money I need for the project. Like, that's certainly possible. But for the context in this scenario, I set up this idea for a film fund 20 months ago, like May of 2023. It kind of came out of, it was after we had done The Carpenter.
Carpenter. Yeah.
I think I maybe even talked to you about an idea like that.
At length.
And
Yeah.
I remember I had a call with the law firm that I work with when we were out there. And I was just like, hey, what would this take? And how does this work? And what can you guys tell me about this? And they gave me some good ideas. So, I mean, over 2 years that I've been thinking about this idea of creating a film fund as a producer. So I spent 18 months testing this thing, like setting up meetings, going to lunches with filmmakers, with investors, with people inside, outside of the industry, and saying, can I share this idea with you? I want to see what you think. And what I'm doing in those meetings is testing the tension. This is a phrase that popped up when I was at Utah Film Festival, Utah International Film Festival a couple of weeks ago. The idea of, when you share your log line or your project or your idea with somebody, is there a pull? Is there some tension that's created where they go, how do I get involved with this?
Yeah.
What do you need? Can I help? Can I be a part of it? Right? If they're leaning in, they're being kind of pulled in. That's a really good sign. So I was doing that for 18 months until I realized I think I've got it. And the moment that I knew I got it was I went out to lunch with a friend, and it was a lunch to be able to talk with his daughter, who was trying to get into film. She's like 16. She'd done a short film and just wanted to talk to some filmmakers. So I was like, yeah, absolutely. I love doing those things. So we talked with her for like 40 minutes. And then the last 20 minutes of the lunch, he's like, well, tell me what you're working on. So I told him about the film fund, and he's like, oh my gosh, that sounds amazing. How can I help? Now, this is a guy with 7 kids, a full-time job. Like, he has plenty of other things to be doing with his time. But in that first conversation, he's like, we could have like a pie night at my house and invite 30, 40 neighbors over. A lot of them have money. It'd be really great to kind of test the waters and see if anyone's interested. And he did that. Like 3-4 weeks later, you and I were at a pie night at his house. So that's a really good sign that you've got some tension that you've created, meaning your idea is good enough to pull people in. So I want to kind of pause there. Maybe I'll just add that you need to know that your idea is ready to go out and pitch before you start putting together a plan, a strategy to do something like a fundraising event.
Yeah.
So thoughts or questions on that before I move on?
No, I think you're right on with things that have been done in the past. And I mean, film fund and the film fund is what you're doing is not a new idea, and I know you know that. But it's been neat to be able to see you say, "This is what I feel like I want to do for, in order to produce a slate of films or to raise money for a slate of films," and you're executing it. I was there for the Pie Night, and it was I'd say it was a home run as far as presenting and again testing the tension, meeting different people, having an opportunity to create warm pitch opportunities. Um, and I think it was a success. And now we're seeing the fruits of that here, I think, at this event.
Yeah. I should also add too that, like, before setting up this event, I had already had 4 people commit to invest in the fund. And so that's another good signal that, like, doing an event is going to work. Right? I've certainly done events in the past, book launch events and other types of events where I've invited 100 people and 6 came and nothing came of it. Like, I've done those events, but in those scenarios, I didn't test the tension. I just said, "Oh, I want to do an event." And then I did one and it didn't really work very well.
Okay.
So I was trying to be a lot more methodical with this one. And as you've seen, it's been months that this has been coming together. So, with that said, that's kind of the context laid. So, how do you do it, right? Let's talk about who, what, where, when, why, and how. I want to start with the why. So, why host a fundraising event? I remember reading a book, and I wish I could remember the name of this book. You may have read it. This was like 15 years ago. My buddy Alan and I were reading this book on the way down to LA. And in it, he talks about this phrase of like, I have numerous projects in various stages of development and stuff. But he talked about putting together a fundraising event and inviting a bunch of dentists and stuff who have money and are bored like, to come to your event. And I just remember that and going, well, that's maybe a good reason to do an event, but maybe you find different people. So, but the idea of why, like, why have an event? Well, the context or the way that I think about fundraising is, and I think we talked about this in the fundraising episode, you're going to have a lot of conversations with people. You're going to have preliminary conversations, introductory conversations, appointments, presentations where you actually pitch what your project is, like hundreds of conversations, at least 100. Like I would set everyone's minimum number of conversations to have if you're going to fundraise for a project or a fund at 100 conversations with people that can invest, right? Not just me talking to you and you talking to me, because that's a conversation, but it's not one that can lead to an investment, right? So how do you have 100 conversations and how long do you want it to take? So I started having one-on-one convos in November and December, and I was trying to get a lot done before the Christmas lull where everybody just kind of goes offline and doesn't respond to texts and emails for 2 weeks. But I had 4 or 5 of those and they were all really positive. And so, okay, great. If I do 1 or 2 of these a week, it's going to take me a year to talk to 100 people, which is what I think I'm going to need to do in order to raise this fund. So that's why I decided to implement this strategy of a fundraising event, because if I can get 100 investors into the same room in the same night for 2 hours together and pitch them all at the same time, A, that's a really good leverage, like it's good use of my time. And B, there's a different feeling with 100 people in the room who are all like, ooh, I want in on this. Oh, this is exciting. Oh, I'm already invested, compared to one-on-one at a Starbucks where it's noisy and there's people checking in on you and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
that's why.
I think one of the things too is, and maybe this is another W, but you've um, set it up at a great event. Already there's buzz about film and there's interest in, we're at Sundance at the Independent Film Festival. And so um, maybe you're going to talk about that. But as far as why, because there's already this kind of zenith where people are very excited about making deals and hearing about stories and being a part of what is going on. So I think it's a really smart play in part of your why.
Exactly. Thank you. So why don't we just jump to when, because that's where I was thinking about that one.
Oh, nice.
So when I was thinking about putting an event together, I was like, well, it can't be November, December, like it's holidays and people are busy and there's already 50 parties that people are going to. And so the thought was, it's 2 parts. One is I'm ready now. Like I want to raise the money right now. I'm ready to do this. So as soon as possible was kind of the initial thought from my end. But then I spent a little bit of time thinking about what's going on in Utah in January. Well, obviously Sundance is happening. Now, opening weekend, like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, even into Monday, is usually pretty jam packed with parties and events and scheduled stuff that the festival and all the different vendors and sponsors are hosting. And so trying to compete with that felt like not a smart idea. Um, but then on top of that, this week is Utah Tech Week, which has become a big event. My friend Trent started it like, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 years ago with like a group of 20 people who did a run in the morning for 2 hours or something. And it's turned into this week-long event where there's 200 self-hosted events for the Utah tech scene. And it's everything from come play ping pong to investor summits to, after hours and, drinks and all that kind of stuff. Like there's panels and pitch fests and there's everything. It runs the gamut now. So it's like, well, I could actually get a lot of people from that community to come to my event if I host it the same week, because then I get the free awareness of it's also listed on the Utah Tech Week schedule and it's on my own Luma page. So maybe that's what we talk about. How do you do it? We use different platforms. So for me, it just felt like, well, this is the week to do it for sure. Monday nights are hard. Wednesday nights are not good for me and my family. Friday nights aren't good. Saturdays aren't good. By that time, people have already left Sundance. So I was like, okay, Tuesday probably makes sense. And so that's where it kind of leads to where to do it. So once I decided when, I started having to think about where am I going to do this and can I get the space so that it's going to work out.
So you can do it.
Um,
One thing
but
on
yeah,
the when, Darren, that I'll mention is, as you were talking about that, it's as deliberate as choosing a release date for the film, right? You're not just kind of randomly selecting, oh, when is it convenient? It's like, no, what is happening around me? What is happening in the film community? What am I going to be competing with? Down to the day, not even the weekend, but down to the day, you are selecting a when. And I think that that's very insightful and very helpful. As we're releasing film or starting production or whatever, pay attention. A filmmaker has got to pay attention to the when.
yeah. Another thought there, because I've used this strategy in the past too with other kind of not film festivals, but like conferences and seminars that I've attended. It's like if you host a lunch or host a 2 hour workshop or host something that's at the same time as the event. I remember I went to an event called CE or Craft and Commerce 2 years ago. It's up in Boise. It's put on by Kit, which is an email ESP. It's a email service platform, whatever ESP stands for. But they're friends of mine. I've been using their email platform for 14 years or something like that. And I just decided there's a lot of cool people that I would love to meet, but events are sometimes hard to connect with people. So why don't I just host a dinner or a lunch? I forget which one it was. But I had like some of the speakers come to lunch. I had some people with like 300,000 followers that I had kind of been adjacent to, but had never really hung out with or spent any time with. We had a dozen people come to this dinner the night before the event officially started.
That's
So
awesome.
it's just something you can apply everywhere. If there's a film festival, you could literally just go talk to the festival and see if they want to help spread the word. Or you can just say, hey, everybody, I'm doing a dinner or I'm going to be at this place and a bunch of filmmakers are coming. And then you invite them all and you show up and everybody pays for themselves. And it's a really great night. So you
Yeah.
can use that win strategy, with anything. It doesn't just have to be a fundraising event.
And the where, you were getting into the where, I'm so excited that you have this location.
I was. So we did why, when, where. We're going out of the order that is typically here, but that's okay. Excuse me. So the where, I knew that it needed to be somewhere cool and exclusive. That's just was kind of the vibe that I knew that I needed up front. And also thinking about this is just kind of what I think about all the time as a producer is where do I have some leverage? Who do I know? Who do I have connections with? Where can I get maybe even for free? And so I had already hosted an event back in October for the producers network that we have here in Utah that you also came to. And we hosted it at the Utah Film Studios up in Park City, which is a massive venue. They have a cool annex that's like, bare bones. Like the room isn't finished yet. The walls are kind of bare and it's kind of a cool vibe. But then they got to take a tour of the facility, which is something pretty exclusive. You can't just show up, knock on the door and be like, hey, can I get a tour? I'm sure Marshall would do that because he's a cool, nice guy. But like most people don't think that they could just go to the film studio and walk around, right?
Sure.
But how many people are here in Utah that are in tech, that are in startups, investment, VC, all those kind of things, which is really big here in Utah? How many of them have had an opportunity to go to a film studio before,
Sure. And
right?
it's a great offer for the film studio because you're saying, "Hey, I'm going to bring a large group of uh, potential investors, film related people to the studio for an event." Studio seems like they would be very interested in having that type of publicity, that type of awareness created for them.
Yeah. So
Great.
when we think about leverage, we're constantly thinking about who on the other side of this transaction, this deal, this agreement would really, really benefit, right?
Yeah.
So you're not asking for a favor, you're presenting them with an opportunity to have this happen at their space.
Yeah. It's
So
great.
we'll talk about this with the who as well, but like when you're thinking about how to put an event together, this event isn't really costing me anything. And we'll talk about that when you talk about sponsors and who's invited and those things. But the where, I've known you, and I have both known Marshall for many, many, many years. He's a good friend. He was our location manager on Faith of Angels. Like we're tight with Marshall, who runs the Utah Film Studios. So that helps for sure. I had done an event there previously, and he had already said, anytime you want to do something like this, you just let me know.
Yeah.
Well, great. That means A, I did a good event last time, and B, I can do it again. And so I tapped into that and said, hey, man, do you have availability Tuesday night? Because I'd love to do another event. Even if there's stuff going on in the stages, like it'd be great to use the annex again. And he's like, absolutely, let's do it. So check, like that part was done. And it's somewhere cool, somewhere exclusive. Yes, there's a little bit of a question mark of a lot of people who are in Salt Lake or Utah County, which could be 30 to 60 minutes away. It's a bit of a drive. And I don't know what weather's looking like today. I haven't checked, but sometimes it gets a little hairy on those highways, right? So
Yeah.
there's a little bit of effort involved for them to get there, which I actually kind of like,
Yeah.
because if they decide to trek an hour up the hill to get to Park City, that shows that they're pretty interested, right? We even have a gentleman who's flying in, not for Sundance, but for this event from North Carolina to come and hear me speak about Producer Fund. So those are all, again, you're testing the tension. That's a lot of pull. We pulled somebody from the East Coast to buy a ticket and fly himself here to be in person. Like that's kind of crazy when you think about it, but that just shows how important it is to test the tension before you start lining something like this up.
Yeah. I think it's a solid location, and I think that is definitely contributing to the legitimacy of the event and what you're doing.
Awesome. All right. Well, then let's dive into who. Like, who should you invite? Who do you have come to this event? So, who do you invite? Well, strategically, there's this term called accredited investors. And they are the people you kind of want to target when you're raising money for projects like this. Now, caveat, there are plenty of projects, short films, documentaries, low budget, like micro budget features, stuff in the 50 to 250K range, where you could raise the money from non-accredited investors, meaning people are giving you 5 grand, 10 grand a pop, and you're raising the money that way. So when you're raising a million plus, it makes sense to go out and try and connect with and invite accredited investors. Now, really quickly, there's 3 qualifications. They just need to meet one of the 3. First one is making 200K a year for the last like 2 years, personal income, not combined with their spouse, but like personal income. So if they make 200K a year, they're an accredited investor. If they have $1 million net worth, excluding the value of their house, they're an accredited investor. And the third one is if they're like a fiduciary with a certain type of qualification, which I don't remember because I've never needed to worry about that. But that's the third qualification. So what that means is you're essentially talking to people who have money and who are accredited, meaning that they have a good sense of what a good investment looks like. They know how to look at a prospectus or a PPM or a subscription agreement and be able to say, oh, this makes sense, or oh, this doesn't make sense. Like they're not just doing it because they're your uncle or because they're your friend or because you're really, really passionate about the project and you're really good at pitching. They're actually making really strategic, informed investment decisions with regarding to your pitch. So that's who you should be looking at. If you go outside of that a little further, you can look at things like family funds, people who have things called DAFs, which are donor advised funds. These are people who've put a couple million or a couple 100,000 away for charitable giving. Sometimes that's set aside for projects or for opportunities like this. There's a whole slew of people you can go talk to, but generally speaking, people with money,
Yeah.
accredited investors. That's who you're looking at inviting.
Darren, it can be an intimidating invite, right? Because as a filmmaker, I mean, typically a lot of independent filmmakers, we didn't go to business school. We don't have an MBA. We're not familiar with PPMs and offerings and putting all those things to securities and that thing. And so to invite a room full of accredited investors who are accustomed to looking at that type of content and to say, here's my idea for a film fund, or here's my idea for a movie, or here's my pitch or my story I want to tell. the questions that you're going to get are most likely, what's the IRR? What's you know more investor related questions. So how do you prepare for that type of thing,
Yeah.
that type of response?
Well, you do it. I mean, part of it is you shift your mindset as a producer to go, oh, I'm not just a creative producer. I'm not just a production guy or gal. You're not just there for running the show during production and prep. If you want to start raising money, then you have to expand your skill set and your experience and understanding and knowledge to be able to learn what all these things are and how it works and what the process is and how to speak investor. And so a lot of it is practice. You can definitely read books. You can definitely listen to podcasts. You can definitely talk to people who have already done it before. And I love the principle that Derek Sivers shared in his book, Your Music and People. He says the fastest way to get anywhere is to call the destination and ask for directions. And so who's already done it? And I mean, a subtle aside is like, I'm doing a lot of that work as well on my blog, on this podcast. You and I are doing this together to be able to say, we've cracked a couple things, so we're going to share it. And so we're kind of giving the directions. I mean, that's what this episode is. It's like, here's how I did it. You can follow the same process. And
Yeah,
so for
yeah,
me, it was a lot of conversations, a lot of reading books, a lot of listening to podcasts, and just testing it. Again, 18 months of having conversations. There was a week where two or three different people in three separate conversations brought up DAFs, donor advised funds, and I'd never heard of them. What on earth is a donor advised fund? And the more that I looked into it, the more I was like, oh my gosh, this is an untapped opportunity. I should be figuring this out. And so I spent a lot of time researching what DAFs were. And that was like 10 hours of 1 week of my time figuring out what a DAF is and how it works and how to talk to people who have them or who maybe want to have them and where can I direct them. And even going to the point where now I have 3 people who can set up a DAF for you. If you're a person with money who wants to put some aside for charitable giving, I could I could connect you with people who set those up.
yeah,
So it's just kind of running the full gamut of, okay, if I'm going to know what these are, I'm going to get really embedded into that world. I feel like I've done that. Right. So it's just kind of taking the mindset of no one else is going to do it. It's my responsibility to figure it out and know how to speak the language and know what these questions and answers are. And that just comes with time and doing it.
yeah.
Unfortunately, everybody wants the quick answer. I'm like, I don't have a quick answer for you.
Well, no, I mean, that's a great answer, and again, it just shows that, like, there's more. I mean, if you're going to treat this as a career and as a business, right? Yes, the idea is come up with a great story that's fun and go out and make your movie, and that's great. But to rinse and repeat, and to do that over and watch your budgets increase and your return potential increase, you have to like step up, and I think that that's what you're doing. It's awesome.
Yeah. So then the question becomes, well, where do you find these people and how do you send out an invite? Well, I will say it's way easier to invite people to an event that's a really cool event at a really cool place than it is to say, hey, can I pitch you my project? Right. So it's actually a really great strategic decision to do something like a fundraising event because it takes the edge off of the request. It's not saying, will you invest in my thing? It's saying, I'm putting this together. It's going to be awesome. You don't have to do anything. Just come and have a good time. And there's going to be a lot of other cool people there. And the way that you present it shows people, oh, this is thoughtfully done. It's put together. There's going to be other cool people there. It sounds like a great event. I would like to go to that. Great. And then they RSVP, right? So where do you find them? Honestly, I'm going to say it again. Do you know what I'm going to say?
You're gonna say something that starts with LinkedIn.
It sounds like LinkedIn. It rhymes with LinkedIn. Yeah, I'm not joking, but it is bonkers how easy it is. And again, I think there's some context here that's important. I've been
Sure.
talking about indie film, producing, fundraising, investing in indie film for 6 or 8 months every single day on LinkedIn. We were documenting our entire process of releasing our 2 movies last year. Like that's when it started, June, July last year. Every day we were talking about film on LinkedIn. And so there have been people who have been paying attention since last summer. And when you talk about something consistently at the level that we're talking about it, like meaning we're doing it, we're in the trenches right now and we're talking about it, A, that's impressive. B, it gives people a sense of, oh, this is what they do. And so there's a level of trust when you say, hey, I'm hosting an event, a Utah Film Investors Summit. They go, well, that makes sense because you are someone who would host an event like that. If I said, hey, I'm hosting an AI summit, people would be like, what are you talking about? Because I never talk about AI. So it doesn't make any sense. So a lot of this is like thinking about what's the run up, what's the lead up to something like going out and pitching a project or going out and raising money or going out and hosting an event. Well, what are you doing in the 3 and 6 months before that make people really comfortable to go, oh yeah, that makes sense. Makes sense that they would be doing something like that. I will click to find out more. Right. So LinkedIn was like number one for me. It was a lot of, I mean, you can literally type in angel investor in quotations, like quotation, angel investor, quotation. And for me, it popped up 15,000 people who have angel investor in their bio on LinkedIn. And a couple hundred of them were first degree connections of mine.
Yeah.
Meaning, here's a secret for you. You can click on their contact info if you're a first degree connection, and it will show you their email address because LinkedIn is awesome. So instead of messaging them on LinkedIn and hoping they get your DM, send them an email, which you have because you're connected. And so I just did that over and over and over again. I can pull up the spreadsheet and show you 100 people one week, 100 people the next week, 100 people the next week. Every week I was messaging and inviting at least 100 people to this event. Now, how many are coming? Well, there's 100 people RSVP'd, and they are 80 to 90% accredited investors. We have some actors coming, we have some industry people coming, we have some people that are just kind of impressive, that are fun, that are going to be there, which makes the event cooler, but mostly accredited investors who have RSVP'd.
It's cool. It's great.
So LinkedIn, number one for me. Number two is Bridge, a Bridge connector. Who is someone who already has the network you need? To me, this was the friend that I went to lunch with back in October, November last year, October, not last year.
Yeah.
He has the network. He's in this world and is very connected because he's a salesperson. And he's just got that vibe of like, he will just start pitching you. Yeah. So, who are the people who already have the network that you need? And
Yeah.
for me, I would say it's lucky, but honestly, it's been very strategic. The last 15 years, I've been adjacent to and attending events put on by Silicon Slopes and VC communities and people that are hosting events for investors and startups and CEOs and people in the tech industry here in Utah, because that's where all the money is in Utah. There's a little bit of, film money in Park City, but it's hard to tap into. And so it's like, all right, well, what if we created a new class of investor in film? What does that look like? And that's kind of what I started thinking about. And so we have a friend who's a bridge, and I've got 3 or 4 others that are coming to the event that basically said, I'm coming. What could you use help with? And I said, I would love for you to look at your contacts. And if there's anyone that should get an invite, either connect me and I'll send it, or you can just invite them.
Yeah.
So I gave that permission to like 4 people who I knew had a network that I didn't have. And my goodness, that is so much more powerful than me DMing someone on LinkedIn. If someone they know and trust, that they've worked with, that they've gone to events for, or whatever it is, if they say, hey, there's an event and you should come, it's very likely that they will consider it and even sign up. So we had a lot of signups come through that way as well. The last thing I'll say as far as who is, you don't just want people with money in the room. You want people who are aligned with the kind of project or projects you're trying to produce, right? The room of people that want to invest in Blumhouse movies is very different than the room of people who want to invest in Angel Studios movies. They're 2 different genres, 2 different visions and missions and kind of stories that they're telling. And if you get a room of faith-based investors, and you're pitching them a slasher horror movie with a lot of gross stuff in it, it doesn't matter how much money's in the room. They're not going to get,
Yeah.
they're not going to get on board. So you got to be
So what's this
conscious of
group tonight?
what's that?
So, so just maybe a selfish question. What's this group tonight? What projects should I bring to pitch?
Well, the nice thing is I've been pitching this fund is it aligns with people who are also thinking about charitable giving, right? We're making movies that change people for good. We're making movies that you want to watch with your kids, that they want to watch with their kids in 30 years because they're well crafted and they're great stories and they're stuff that's accessible to the whole family. That doesn't mean animated Disney Channel movie of the week, but it does mean these are movies that you're going to love and you're going to want to take your family to the premiere and to go see it in theaters, right? Because the only kind of content, the only kind of films that are coming out serving that audience are animated movies recently, right? It's the
Yeah.
Disneys and Pixars and the animated stuff, which is great. I love going to the theater with my boys and watching those movies, but man, I would put Faith of Angels in that category, right? It's a story about a boy who's lost in the mind, and there's a lot of teens involved. And like my kids came and saw it and invited their friends, because yeah, dad produced this movie, but also it's a movie that they liked watching and wanted to tell their friends about and invite them to come see it. So movies like that.
Yeah.
So when you do that and you expand it into how you're producing it and why you're producing it and the vision of how you're going to impact the industry over a number of years, people really get in line or align with the mission beyond just the projects themselves. So, interesting tidbit, I have not been pitching the projects to investors. I
Yeah.
haven't told a single investor, here are the projects I'm going to invest in. No, because it's not, you're not investing in films, you're investing in a fund that's going to pick the films given certain parameters and all those things, which we can talk about in a later episode. But it's not about the movies.
Yeah.
It's about, this is the kind of movies we're going to do, and you're going to be involved in picking them and giving a thumbs up or thumbs down. We want everyone to feel good about the movies we're producing, but as soon as you start talking about it that way, people can see that there's like a cause behind it, like there's a mission, there's a vision, there's something that's really good at the heart of it,
Yeah.
and that is the kind of people who have been pulled, like feel the tension to come to this event.
I think it's a cool model and a great concept. And at the Angel event a couple days ago up at Sundance, it was,
Mm-hmm.
again, a room full of very well well informed investors and people who had access to a lot of money. And an Angel was standing up there. Neil and Jeff and Jordan Harmon were talking about just this innate desire that people have, that they want to make a movie or to want to tell a story, and it's pretty universal, and it's the people with money that are able to do that, and so where they are not necessarily storytellers or filmmakers, but they want to participate in that process. And so I think that you're filling up a room full of 100 people that have that desire, that are at least curious enough to drive an hour out of the way. They already have money. They're experienced making money and doing what they do. And so now this gives them an opportunity to hobnob and trust and listen and learn from a producer who is going to help them select the right stories to tell.
Yeah.
I think it's awesome.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a different structure than I've seen any other producer before. So it's fun because it's never been done before. So that's an exciting element of it. So we've covered why, when, where, who. And so we need to talk about what. Like, what does the actual event look like? So let me just cover this quickly. And then I want to talk about sponsors as well. So what it is a 2-hour summit. We call it a summit because we're doing a couple of different things as part of the agenda for the evening. It's not just everybody get in a room and talk to each other and then leave after 2 hours, but it's a 2-hour event. So it's not 3 or 4, like 2 hours is a sweet spot. There's a book by Nick Gray called The 2-Hour Cocktail Party. And I would highly recommend you read it and think about it, because it gives you really good tips as far as like how to send out invites and how to remind people and how to run the event and what kind of stuff should you include in an event like that. This is different because there's 100 people coming. It's not a 12-person house party, right? But
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
used a lot from that book. So it's a 2-hour event, and we have some sponsors involved, which make the event even cooler. So I've got a buddy of mine, Ryan Innes, who's a singer-songwriter. He's been on The Voice. He's been on Songland. He's extremely
I've done a
good.
music video for him. I love
There you
Ryan.
go. As have I. That's awesome. So, Ryan and I go way back. We were in school together at BYU. We're talking nearly 20 years ago. We were in classes together. Both of us did not have beards at the time because you're not allowed to have them at BYU. But I mean, we go way, way back, and I've run sound for this guy dozens of times over the years because I used to run sound. And so he's coming to the event, right? And he's cutting me a sweet deal. He's not charging me the thousands of dollars he normally charges. He's cutting me a deal, right? And so it's one of those things. This is going to be the same across all four sponsors that we have for the event, is that there's an upside for them that's greater than the money they could have gotten in exchange for catering or being at the event, right? So for him, I'm covering like gas in a little bit of his time, not his full fee.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
we have the venue, right? So we talked about that. The third one is I have another buddy who runs a company called San Diablo Churros. And I met him 8 years ago when he was just starting out. He was at a house party that I was at. And it was like one of the first 4 or 5 events that he'd ever run. And they were amazing. And he was cool. And we went and got tacos after. And we ran a Spartan race together like a year after
Yeah,
that. Like we're just
yeah,
buddies. But he runs this company that's now been on Shark Tank and has won best of state, best pastry like 6 years in a row. Like he's a super talented, successful dude. So I said, hey, Scott, I'm hosting this event. I thought of you first, and think of like, listen to the way that I'm um, kind of presenting this or packaging it
yeah,
or positioning it, because it's not, hey, will you come and do this event for free for me? Right. It's, hey, I'm hosting this event and I have room for 2 sponsors. And I thought of you first because I wanted to give you the opportunity. Let me tell you about the event. It's a Utah Film Investor Summit. I got 100 investors, like CEOs, people with companies, people that are in VC funds and host their own events and stuff all the time. They're coming to this event. So I wanted to see if that's something you'd be interested in. Normally, I'd have like a $500 budget, but if you wanted to comp that and come, I'll give you 2 minutes to kind of pitch the room so that you can tell them about what you're up to. And he's like, oh my
nice.
gosh, dude, thank you for thinking of me. That's amazing. 100%. I want to be there. That was his response on the first call. Right.
Yeah,
And so then I said, hey, do you know anyone, because he's always doing events, do you know anyone that could do drinks? Right. I would love to have like a soda bar or something like that. He's like, oh yeah, there's this guy, Ethan. Let me text him. Let me connect you. He'll do it. So because of Scott's recommendation, Ethan is doing the same thing. Instead of me paying him $500 for the event, which it typically would be $1,500 or $2,000, I think,
yeah, yeah,
is comping the event, like paying out of his pocket for the supplies, for the drinks, for his people, all their time. He's
yeah,
paying that in order to be there at the event and get 2-3 minutes to pitch the room. So how you position that is really important. But essentially, the venue, the musical guest, the churros and the drinks were all free, not because they're doing me a favor, but because I created something that was valuable, more valuable to them than the dollars they could have gotten just for catering the event.
yeah. Brilliant, brilliant. And so is there a schedule? We show up at 7 and Ryan sings a set or and then we go into
Yeah,
pitch.
yeah, I can talk about that. So it's a 6 to 8. I try to do it a little earlier. 7's pretty typical for these things, but I figured 6 to 8 lets them drive home at 8 o'clock and be home by 9, which
Okay.
isn't too late for people. If it went from 7 to 9, then they're getting home at 10:30. And on a Tuesday, that might wreck your week a little bit. I'm sure I'll be there till like 10 o'clock though. So it's going to wreck my week. That's okay. So yeah, 6 o'clock people show up, they sign in. I have another person who's an aspiring producer. He's done a couple of short films and he just did a feature, like a low budget feature. So he's coming and he's volunteering his time in exchange to be in the room to see how it works, to learn from me. And so he's running the check-in desk and the coat check for me. So like 6:30 people are arriving, grabbing churros and drinks. 6:30 Ryan plays for 15-20 minutes. Then I give the sponsors their chance to talk. So, Marshall from the film studio and the San Diablo Churros and drinks are all going to be able to take 2-3 minutes to say, this is who we are, this is what we're doing, whatever it might be, their pitch. And then we're going to do a little roundtable. So this is why I called it a summit, because we want to talk about the opportunity that exists with indie film right now. You're coming off of, crazy couple of years. You start with COVID and then you get into the dual strikes of 2022. And then last year, Hollywood didn't really recoup. Beginning of this year, you had fires in LA. You've got mass exodus from people up and
Sure.
leaving LA to move to other states and other countries even. And so if that's not the model that's working anymore, the Hollywood system, Well, what opportunity is there with the indie film ecosystem? And we're even talking about doing something different than other people are doing right now. So we're
Yeah.
kind of setting the stage and the tone and giving people kind of the context of we're talking about indie film and the opportunity that exists. We'll do that for 15 or 20 minutes. After that, I'm going to do my little 5 to 10 minute pitch for Producer Fund One. And I don't know if I've talked about this book before, but the 3 minute rule by Brant Pinvidic, that's the framework for my 5 to 10 minute pitch. It's what is it? How does it work? Are you sure? Can you do it? And there's a couple other elements in there as well, but you basically come up with about 30 bullet points and you just say those in order. And the flow really works and it gets people to understand what it is, how it works, how they can get involved. By the end of that, it'll be like, and I'm here if you have questions, but I hope you're in. If you're in, I'll show you this. I bought little, see if it doesn't
To
change its
focus on it. Yeah.
doesn't focus. So I've got these little money clips and these business cards. So the business card just says Producer Fund One on it. On the back, it says, "Are you in?" It's not going to work, is it? "Are you in?" with a QR code. It says, "Scan the QR code, text me, or email me." It's
Cool.
all right there. And the money clip is branded. It says Producer Fund One on it. So there's a little memento that's like, I was there the day, the night, the event that this happened. The
Cool.
day that this took off, I was there, I was involved. Like that's a meaningful thing that cost me like $1 per unit. I bought 100
That's
of them
cool.
and printed 100 business cards. We'll put all the business cards of everybody else, the sponsors, in that little stack and hand it when they check in. So the rest of the night, the last 30, 40 minutes, they get to take a tour of the Utah Film Studios and hang out, eat churros, drink soda, talk to me, talk to each other. And there's plenty of other people in the room that also have opportunities. So as they're talking with people, it's not just me. I strategically was like, hey, you're going to be there. You have stuff that you're pitching and talking to people about. And I've encouraged you to do so, right? It's not just like hush, hush, and only talk about Darren. It's like, no, talk about your projects because they may be more interested in that. Where they may be interested in Lindsay has a harbor fund, $100 million development fund that she's raising. Like there's a bunch of people that are coming that'll be in the room that have opportunities. Just because I set up the event, I get the microphone for 5 to 10 minutes to pitch my thing. But there's plenty of abundance, plenty of opportunity in the room for people who are looking.
Yeah. So great. Well, I'm excited. I'm excited for probably next week's episode where we'll talk about how it went and what project you're going to select first, because I can't imagine this not being a hit for you. You've put so much time and energy and effort into it, and you've backed it up with your experience. So
Thanks, man.
I'm just rooting for it to work out for you.
That means a lot. One of the investors that's coming tonight texted me this morning and said, "Hey, what's your?" Let me read it because it was a cool question. What's going to be the measure of a successful evening for you? Knowing that may help my wife and I align with you. I was like, that's a great question. Thank you for asking. So, just to get into a little bit of the nitty gritty with what is the fund and how does it work, I set it as a $2 million minimum, meaning until I have $2 million committed, I can't start spending money from the fund. And so that just shows that, okay, we have enough commitment to greenlight the first two projects and have 2 years worth of runway in order to produce those projects. And that gives me the full year to raise the total amount, which is $10 million. So my answer to him was, $2 million mark is like the bare minimum. Like I need to get to that tonight, not necessarily this evening by midnight, but from the conversations from the event and the follow-up emails and texts and getting people committed, I'd like to see 2-3 million minimum by the end of the week, end of the month. And, perfect world, the whole 10 drops this week and we're oversubscribed and we have plenty of demand for people who want to be involved with this. And we know that we're going to do 10 movies over the next 4 years and we just go. So it's somewhere in that range that we're hoping. And so, yeah, it's exciting. I weirdly, I've never seen this pop up on my Apple Watch. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but this morning it popped up and said 2 of your vitals were way out of range last night. My heart rate was
Yeah.
between 80 and 120 all night. Like 120 is like zone 2 cardio. Like, what are you talking about? Why was I at 120? Like in the middle of the night while I was sleeping. And my
Yeah.
respiratory rate went up. It's normally like 12 and it went up to 16, which is a 33% increase. That's a massive change. And it showed me the graph, and it was like, here's your normal, and then ding ding, like these two are up here. What happened last night? And I genuinely wonder how much of it is just like the excitement and anticipation for tonight, because it's been a few years. It has been a few years, but a few months of very focused,
Yeah,
invested time in order to get to this point. So very, very excited.
100%, 100% of that, yeah, occurrence is because of that energy and excitement.
Yeah.
So that's amazing. Well, I'm again so excited for you, and I look forward to seeing you tonight at 6 o'clock. We'll be there. I'm
Thanks so
excited.
much, man. Cannot wait. It's going to be a good time.
Okay. Any other questions or comments or anything? I did have somebody reach out and wants to know. Uh, they've put together a feature length documentary, and they're looking for theatrical. You know, who can. This is their first film. They've gotten a write up. This I'm just reading this text right now. We got a write up on MLB.com. We're not sure how to get the film to a wider audience. It's a documentary. We'd love to get it streaming somewhere, and ideally even do a little theatrical release. Is there a distributor that you'd recommend that would not take advantage of us? Uh,
Yeah.
great,
Well, that,
already a great mindset. You know, be careful. You know, it's your first film, and you don't want to be taken advantage of.
yeah.
But but what a fun spot to be in, I guess, to be able to be getting some traction on your first film. I mean, I think that if they're getting write ups on MLB, it might be worth doing some festivals, especially for a documentary, feature length documentary. It looks like a great topic. It's about the Trappers, the longest winning baseball streak in history,
Oh,
which
nice.
is kind of a fun thing.
That
Um,
sounds awesome.
yeah. So I'd do festivals, and as you talk to any filmmaker, put your film in festivals, and as it gets screened and selected, try to go to those that where you've done your research and you know that there will be distributors in the audience, or invite distributors in the audience, and start talking to them and get a good idea of who you might work with, who could do with your film what you want done with the film. Or you can also look at self-releasing through some of the aggregators out there, and that's a great just a simple online search for feature film aggregators or streaming aggregators helps. There are several that come up, and check the reviews and maybe reach out to other filmmakers that are distributed through them and find out what their experience has been. But there's no shortage of ways to get your film out there.
Yeah. I would just echo what I said earlier, which is call the destination and ask for directions. Like, what are the other sports documentaries that have had a successful theatrical release? And if there are none, then that says something about what you're up against. But if there are some, guess what? You can go find the filmmaker. And you know what filmmakers like? People calling them and asking them questions about their movies. So I guarantee if you find the director or the producer of another documentary that did well and said, "Hey, I watched your thing. I love it. Congrats on the success. I wondered if I could ask a few questions about your distribution strategy. I have got a documentary that we're looking at doing right now."
Yeah,
Right? I mean, you could ask 5 or 10 people that and get a couple of calls and probably find someone. And what's great about that strategy is they can just put you in touch with the director or the distributor they used. They
yeah,
know who they are. So if it's XYZ releasing or whatever the company is, they go, "Well, you should just talk to Garrett over here at this company and I'll put you in touch." Well, there
yeah,
you go. Now you don't have to wait for a festival and hope that they're there. You're taking a more proactive approach of, who do I want to work with? Well, there's maybe 5 or 10 distributors that are really great fits. How do you get in touch with them? Well,
yeah.
what movies have they already done? Talk to the filmmakers, get to them. That's what I would do.
I love it. For this particular one, I'm going to refer them to some friends of mine who made a movie about a surfer, and it got distributed through a distributor called Sidewinder Films,
Nice.
and it's been on PBS and been out. It had a theatrical run, and again, probably aligns with what another sports themed movie. So yeah, there's definitely people out there. You don't always feel like you have to just run to Netflix and take a no rewards deal.
Yeah. You could also look at Fathom Events. They do a lot of documentaries as well, and they just kind of do a weekend release. But you can get $1-2 million in a weekend because they have the channel already to get 100,000 or 500,000 people out to an event. and you make it more of an event release rather than a typical traditional theatrical release. And then that boosts your post theatrical as well because you did it. So
Yeah.
that's maybe something to think about as well.
Awesome.
Yeah, dude.
Anything else? This has been a good episode, man. Very informative. I need to let you rest your voice. You got a big event coming up.
I'm very excited. It's all just gratitude and excitement at this point. There's no nervous energy. It's just
Good.
it's also not to keep being long-winded, but like I've done a lot of events over the years. I've hosted dozens. I've done podcasts and speaking and interviews and like all these things. So this isn't the first time.
Yeah.
So if you're listening to this and going, well, there's no way I could do that. Well, start small. Start with a house event. Like invite 6 people over and pitch them your project and say, I just want to practice this, or whatever it is for you that it feels comfortable, and then work your way up to it. So not to say that I'm anything special, but it always bumps me out a little bit when people are like, well, I could never do that. It's not available to me because I haven't done XYZ. It's like, well, I hadn't done it either until I did it. And, I've been at this 18 years. Like,
yeah,
it takes time, but I hope the takeaway is it's possible. Like, I'm just some dude in Provo, Utah, of all places, that's doing this stuff, and it's going to work. Whether it's tonight or whether it's 3 months from now or 12 months from now, I don't care. It's going to work. It's going to happen. And hopefully that's the mindset people can take away and go, well, okay, well, what do I want to have work? What do I want to make happen? Just go do it.
I love it. Okay, man. Thanks for the episode. We'll see you in a bit tonight. Have
Thanks,
a
dude.
great rest of the festival, and look forward to talking with you next week.
Same. Thanks, Garrett.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Truly Independent. To join us on the journey, be notified, and ask us questions about today's episode, head over to 3coinpro.com/podcast and put in your name and an email address. If you're a fan of the show, please leave us a review on your favorite podcast app and be sure to share this. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week. Our intro and outro music is Election Time by Kjartan Abel.